The Baggies podcast, giving you the latest news, views and opinions on all things Albion. Now available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
Hello and welcome to the Baggies podcast. It's another post-match podcast here on the Baggies podcast network. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and YouTube for video format podcasting. Today, it's a post-match podcast after last night's 3-0 defeat against Leicester. No, not a good one at all. No, not one that we want to be talking about today. Unfortunately, that is the way the land lies in last night's game. It was a pretty difficult one to take, but we're going to discuss all of that, get your thoughts on it, and hopefully put it straight under the carpet before the next game against Aston Villa. However, if you're new around here, make sure you're subscribing to the Baggies podcast. Make sure you've got your notifications on. If you're on YouTube, make sure you just click subscribe on your podcast provider. If you want to leave us a nice review on Apple Podcasts, that's always a lovely thing to get from you guys. We've had a few already, some really good ones, so make sure you're doing that. And if you're following us on Twitter at thebaggiespodcast or at louisben_, that would be fantastic as well. All the links will be in the description if you fancy checking those out. But yeah, a post-match podcast for last night's defeat against Leicester. Match reaction on the Baggies podcast, giving you up-to-date analysis and opinion on every Albion game. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify and YouTube to get notified whenever we release a new episode. The Baggies podcast. Here we are again then, after some positive results recently against Southampton and Chelsea. We're back again for another dire review and dissection of another Albion defeat. I mean, not what we wanted at all, let's be clear about that. It's not something that we would have wanted to see last night. I mean, the momentum going into the game was slightly lowered by the fact that we hadn't had a game, I think, for 9 days before it. I mean, you know, that's quite harsh on us to not be able to continue that momentum. I think we asked to play the Villa game on the weekend whilst Leicester were playing their cup semi-final, but apparently that request was denied. But yeah, we can't make excuses for that sort of thing. Our momentum has died a little bit because of that, but last night's performance was a bit inexcusable. I think there are lots of things that went wrong, and obviously we're going to discuss that today on the podcast and hear your thoughts as well. But it was not the sort of Albion side that we'd come to see over the past couple of weeks. It wasn't the high pressing. There wasn't any high pressing, actually. I don't know where that went or where that had disappeared to, but there was none of that. Just kept getting pulled out of shape. I mean, Brendan Rodgers today got things tactically spot on, and I don't think Allardyce did. It felt a little bit like we were saving ourselves for this Villa game on Sunday, which I think is probably more winnable than that one. But let's not forget, Leicester are a very good side. They're a top 6 side. Not Super 6 side, but definitely a top 6 side. So yeah, definitely got to put that into account. Got to take that into account that they are still a really good side, and they're not going to get battered by us at all like some of the teams recently, even if it is Chelsea. But yeah, they played really well, Leicester. They had a lot of really good standout performers. I think there were lots of players that really pulled their weight in that Leicester side, but there were lots of players in this Albion side that weren't quite as good enough. Weren't quite as good as I thought they would perhaps be in this particular game. I was disappointed with a lot of performances. The defence wasn't quite on it at all. I think Brendan Rodgers really got things tactically spot on, as I mentioned, with that ball over the top. There was constant pulling our fullbacks out of position to go and press, and then there's space in behind for the pacey forwards of Vardy and Iheanacho as well. So yeah, that was quite difficult to take, really, to be honest. It wasn't the game that we wanted to see at all. I mean, has it halted our momentum a lot? I wouldn't say a lot, but it's certainly not helped us at all. It's certainly not brought on any form of positivity after that game. It just didn't look like anybody cared. I mean, Yakushlu, one of the players that I've been pretty prone to speaking positively of, was not on it last night. He was giving the ball away. He was making rash tackles. I don't know whether it's because Big Sam's maybe taken him to told him to drop 20% or something, but it just felt like the midfield was overran, and that's not something we've said recently, because we've got these legs in this midfield. We've got Maitland-Niles, we've got Yakushlu, we've sometimes got Gallagher in there as well, so it's not something we've been saying often about this midfield being overran, but it really was last night. I know Tielemans, Maddison, Ndidi, they are quality footballers. They are top-end Premier League footballers, but yeah, we still didn't make things anywhere near as difficult enough for this Leicester side. I think they really got away quite easily. They didn't really have to get out of second gear. I don't think. I think they weren't in they weren't in top gear at all. They were really just sort of having to play at an okay standard. But they got 3 goals in 13 minutes, which just killed the game off for us. We didn't look. I think we knew we were sort of chasing a lost cause, so we didn't bother to try towards the end of that game. But I feel like those 3 goals were very preventable. A lot of that was preventable. I mean, we didn't look like we had this solid defensive line, solid midfield line, and then the couple of Pereira and Diagne up front. I mean, there's a lot of players that went missing last night, and let's actually go into that now. We're going to go through the lineup, and I'll give you my thoughts on each and every player in the Albion lineup last night. So we played an unchanged lineup from Southampton, which I thought was a good idea, and it proved not to be. Johnston was in goal for us last night. He was okay. He was good because he was good because of the nice little one-on-one save he made with Iheanacho, which leads me on to Townsend, who caused that error. I think he was fairly error-prone. I don't think Furlong really put the best shift in, neither did Townsend. I don't think. It was more of a collective. It's not individual. Let's get that straight. O'Shea, Ian Bartley wasn't very good. That back forward, they just didn't. I don't know what it was tactically that didn't go right, but they did look very exposed at times. It looked like there wasn't very many players near them, and there was too many spaces for Leicester to exploit. Really, that back four as a unit, I wouldn't want to single anybody out of that, but certainly not the sort of game we've come to expect from this back four over recent times, where we've looked a lot more defensively solid. In terms of midfield, Phillips on the right. He didn't provide very much cover to help Furlong, to be honest. Robinson was taken off at half time. I mean, I hope that's not his days numbered. I hope that was just a sort of resting thing or something along those lines. But he wasn't great in this game today, Robinson. I think it was a collective thing. As I say, it's not really, nobody made that many errors, but nobody was really working together as much as they probably should have been. Maitland-Niles was, considering he was meant to be influential in this midfield, he's in the middle of a West Bromwich Albion midfield, which should be all over the ball. And even if they haven't got possession, they should be all over trying to get the ball back. But Maitland-Niles had the least touches of any outfield player on the pitch today who played the full duration. Can I just add 26 touches of the ball? When you're playing for West Bromwich Albion and you're in a relegation scrap, it's probably not good enough at all. Yokushlu he wasn't quite as good. He was giving the ball away a bit, which isn't something I'm used to with him. I mean, he clearly wasn't at the races today. I think he got himself a little bit frustrated, but yeah, Yokushlu was not that great, to be honest. Neither was Pereira. Pereira was fairly missing for large parts of the game. Diagne as well. He missed that chance really, really early on in the game, and I mean, like, very early on. And he didn't make an impact today, unfortunately. It's a shame because he's a good striker, I think, with his hold-up play. He does a lot on the ball and not a lot off it, and not a lot in front of goals. So if you get what I mean, he's good at linking up this sort of this attack and this sort of side that are trying to play the ball around an opponent and trying to lump balls over the top and get combinations flowing. But Diagne was not good today. He's bought off for Hal Robson-Kanu. Kanu, Ajayi and Grant came on, none of which really notably did anything particularly. Ajayi missed a pretty decent chance late on in the game to try and at least muster a goal back. I mean, it was it doesn't mean that Leicester aren't a bad team. Let's just retract a minute. Leicester are a good team. I think even if we were playing at 100%, I don't think the players were really giving their all today. Let's make that clear. But for me, Leicester are a top 6 side, not a big 6 side I mentioned, but they are a top 6 side. They're not going to make things easy for us. Our survival hooks are really hanging by a thread now, and they rest quite a lot on the next couple of games. Can Big Sam muster up a derby day feeling with regards to the Wolves and Villa game? Can he muster that derby feeling? Can he get people hyped up like he did against the Wolves game last time out? But yeah, Leicester had a game in the FA Cup. They weren't great against Southampton, but then we thought we might have a bit of an advantage, but actually it looked like they hadn't played for a couple of weeks, and they was just getting back into things, whereas we were just we played a match every day for the past week. We looked pretty tired. I don't know whether that's because we're tired or whether it's because we were trying to save ourselves or something, but the stats tell it all, to be honest. 73% possession in Leicester's favour, 17 shots for them, 17 chances created, 5 big chances. They were just all over us, to be honest, all over us. Not a proud moment to be a West Brom fan. Last night, we created 3 chances, which, was nowhere near good enough. But in terms of that game, I mean, we just kept getting exposed over the top. The ball over the top just kept going over, and we just couldn't hack it. I don't know what it was, but every time that ball went over the top, Vardy and Iheanacho, they just looked like they could score every time. I mean, Iheanacho scored his goal, but he wasn't very good in front of goal. They could have had 5. They could have had 6, perhaps. So, yeah, not good enough from a defensive perspective from Albion. But, yeah, that was not really what we wanted to hear, and that was not really what we wanted to see after some really good results recently. In terms of Leicester, I thought they were very good, as I said. See Johnny Evans and Vardy scoring. Vardy, who loves scoring against West Brom, and Johnny Evans, who is a former West Brom player, as a lot of you will know. But no, not the game we wanted, not the game that we were looking for, and not the result we were looking for by any stretch of the imagination. I think it's going to be a difficult task to lift ourselves from the Villa game, because that was just such a poor performance. It wasn't like it was 3-0, but they scored a couple late on, and it sort of teetered the balance of the game. They scored 3 goals in 13 minutes, and that was the game killed off straight away. So yeah, we now stand 9 points from safety with 6 games to play. It looks a pretty undoable task, but we'll have to see. But now, time to get your reaction in the fan reaction section of the podcast.
Fan reaction on the Baggies podcast, giving you the chance to share your thoughts on all things Albion. Email a voice note or a video clip with your thoughts to thebaggiespodcast@gmail.com for a chance to be shown in next week's episode. Fan reaction on the Baggies podcast, giving you, the fans of West Bromwich Albion, a voice.
Time for a bit of fan reaction on the Baggies podcast. It's time to talk a bit about what you guys think. What have you guys been tweeting? What have you guys been getting involved with on social media? Let's have a little look, because you guys have been getting in touch. You've been sending in your thoughts and your questions. So make sure you keep doing that. If you follow us on Twitter at @thebaggiespodcast. We're also on Instagram if you want to follow us on there at @thebaggiespodcast. Absolute Baggies has commented below, and he says, no team rotation. Having said that, we were outclassed tonight. So another comment from Absolute Baggies as well said, they looked drained, awful, off the pace, awful decision making. Second half damage limitation was necessary. Maybe save too many missed opportunities. So yeah, we weren't good enough in this. We weren't good enough. Let's be fair. The game was gone by half time, and we were really slow, as he says there. We were so off the pace. It was like we'd been playing every day for the past 7 days. It wasn't good enough. I mean, we were clearly just not in the right frame of mind to play the game today. I don't know what was the matter with us, but we just didn't look on it at all. It was like, it's like somebody had like taken all our energy and just put it in a jar and put it in the bin. We were not in the right frame of mind to play this game. I don't know what was the matter with us. I think Big Sam did get things tactically wrong. I didn't see any of that high pressing today. I think a lot of the time it ended up the wingers didn't perhaps track back as much as they could to help the fullbacks. So therefore, you've got Townsend and Furlong, and they're against somebody like, I don't know, Castagna, or I think it was Luke Thomas, the other wing back. They just kept forming, and then Vardy and Iheanacho split wide, and they come in behind where Townsend and Furlong. It's a simple ball down the line, and then they are there away, and that movement in the box is too much to handle. I think that Big Sam did get things quite wrong tonight. I don't think it's massively his fault, let's be honest, but I think he was a bit naive in his tactical approach today, because I think there was not enough protection for that back four. You know what Leicester are going to do. You know they've got fast strikers, so get people in front to stop the flow of the ball through to the strikers, because you've got Furlong and Townsend isolated against these wing backs, and then you've got Vardy and Iheanacho who are splitting, and they're coming in behind these wing backs. It's not really particularly defendable if you've got those 2-on-1 situations, or you've got that Iheanacho or that Vardy running behind as well. Yeah, my words after the game were a poor performance from very lacklustre Albion team, and the game was done and dusted thanks to 3 goals within 13 minutes of each other. I think that was probably a fair observation. I think, a lot of the stuff I've been seeing on Twitter is pretty negative, but I think we do need to remember this isn't at the bottom of the table team. This is not a terrible team. This is not an awful team. They're a good team, and they're obviously going to put in a really good game. I mean, I suppose there's no excuses to not try, because I want to be, you want to beat everyone, but perhaps he's learnt his lesson a little bit from the game against Everton and the game against Newcastle, which came straight after. We tried our very best at Everton, and then against Newcastle we looked drained. Perhaps that's something that he's thought is something he's taken into account. It's something that he's added into his tactical approach, because that team was not the team that we've seen over the past 2 weeks. That team over the past 2 weeks was playing simple football that was effective. I didn't see any of that today, unfortunately. So I think if we try and get that tactical approach spot on against Villa, we might be able to get a win. But it's quite hard now, because you've taken away that momentum. You've dropped that momentum. You've essentially said, sod the momentum, we're going to go and try and get a win against Villa. But it's hard to do that when you've let things slip out of your hands. Leicester were really good. Leicester were a top 6 side, and they look a top 6 side. But Albion looked a Championship side playing a Premier League side today. It was not good enough. I mean, Albion were outclassed, but Leicester just found ways to cut through. I think the one thing I said was a knife through hot butter. I think was one of the first tweets I tweeted during the match, but it wasn't very good. I think it's just you need to keep that momentum going, whoever you're playing. But I can sort of see how Sam was doing things in this particular game. I mean, we've had games against Leicester in the past where we've been battered, and this season and 2-3-0 wins. Leicester were just carving us apart, really, to be honest. I mean, Brendan Rodgers got things really spot on. I think a lot of people got their hopes up because we've been on a bit of a run, myself included. But I think a lot of people will just need to give their heads a little bit of a wobble and realise who we're actually playing. There's no excuse for not trying hard enough or not putting in the best possible performance that you can. But you can still try and keep things up, and you can still try and keep that. You can still try and keep that form up. I mean, the only way you're going to survive is by constantly getting that momentum, rather than putting yourself to the curb and not really trying very much. I mean, if you're gonna keep that form and momentum going, I just don't get why you wouldn't keep, you've got that form and momentum over those past 2 games. Why wouldn't you keep it going? Because the only way you're going to survive is by doing that. I mean, Leicester were very good, as I've said, but Albion not so good, and not so good at all. I mean, in terms of next game, we've got Villa. They're going to be a difficult side, but they haven't got Grealish. I don't know what's happening with Grealish. I think a lot of people have been saying some rumours about him liking sleeping tablets or something. But obviously, Villa a good side still. They're not a bad side without Grealish. They haven't got Matty Cash either, which might be a little bit of an advantage to us. But we've taken the momentum away now, so it's going to be incredibly difficult to try and pick up a victory. Villa currently sat in 11th place. They're very safe from relegation, very, very safe. They're 20 points above us. But it's going to be difficult, and we're going to have to pull out all the stops. But maybe, just maybe, we can get a win here and maybe a win against Wolves, and we might start to really challenge and try and dig our way out of this. But it's becoming a too little, too late situation. Even if we win these next 2 games, we still won't catch up with Burnley. So it's definitely going to be something that goes right down to the wire if we do continue to pick up a couple of victories along the way. But if we lose next game, I think if we lose the next game and Burnley and Newcastle and Brighton win, I think we might get relegated by Wolves, which wouldn't be what anybody wants. But that's your thoughts on the game, and that's also my thoughts on the game for Albion Leicester. And lo and behold, that brings us to the end of the Baggies podcast here on YouTube, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you've enjoyed the episode, be sure to hit the subscribe button wherever you're listening to your podcast on your podcast provider. Make sure you're leaving us a review if you've enjoyed the podcast, leaving us a nice comment on YouTube perhaps. Let me know your thoughts on the game. I'd love to hear that. If you tweet me at thebaggiespodcast, I'd really like to hear that as well. But make sure you're doing that, and make sure you keep interacting with the podcast. It's very great to hear and obviously very nice to hear your thoughts on the games as well as they go along. But make sure you're checking out the podcast, and make sure you're keeping up with everything on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, wherever you're listening. It'd be great to hear what you think about the games and what you're thinking about the podcast as well. So yeah, let me know your thoughts, and I'll see you hopefully on Monday for another episode after the Villa game. Maybe another 3 points, maybe another defeat. We will have to see, and hopefully we can get it over the line, and we'll see what's occurring. Thank you very much, Albion fans, for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.